and welcome back. Today we look at Durham Prison, which was a suggestion, and if you have any other prison suggestions, please let me know in the comments. As always, we start off with some history and how the prison is today, and then we will get into the inmates, but if you want to head straight to the inmates, the timestamps are below. It was first established as the North Gate in Sadler Street in 1072. It was rebuilt in the early 15th century and became known as Northgate Prison. In the early 19th century, the two institutions were put together at the current site just south of the new Durham Courthouse. It consisted of 600 cells and opened in 1819. Between 1869 and 1958, 95 inmates were sent to the gallows. The prison was always in and out of the local newspapers, but in the 1960s and 70s, two authors wrote books based on the prison: Psychological Survival, The Experience of Long-Term Imprisonment, Escape Attempts, and Crime Punishment and Classification. Durham had been a prison for Category A women and men inmates, and it was praised for its progressive movement to lower violence. Yet in 1990, Darren Brooke, who was just 19 years old, had his life taken by another inmate, Kenneth Carter. Kenneth Carter was released from prison in 2015. In 2003, it was revealed that Durham had the highest prison rate for inmates taking their own lives in England and Wales. In 2004, a report by the Chief Inspector of Prisons criticised it for being severely overcrowded and the lack of education and work opportunities. The female high-security wing with 120 prisoners was closed, and the prisoners were transferred elsewhere. This was in 2005, and due to overcrowding and female prisoners being in a high percentage of taking their own lives. In 2011, it was announced that along with several other prisons, Durham Prison would be put up for market testing as part of a Ministry of Justice plan to make savings of almost 25%. A 2014 report by the Inspector of Prisons found that a third of inmates tested positive for substance use, a rate which was almost twice as high as similar prisons. Rates of violence were also higher than expected, which indicated that monitoring should be improved. The prison was, however, praised for the quality of work, activity and learning available to prisoners. It had an inspection in 2014, and these were the key points. The Governor had worked hard to improve his leadership team and had plans to develop his managers. There was a renewed focus on the priorities to improve reception processes and provide more meaningful activity for prisoners. The jail can build on its strengths and continue to improve, despite the challenges that come from national population pressures. A new governor and deputy brought some much needed stability to this aging, overcrowded reception prison, but most prisoners spent 22 or more hours a day locked in their cells, forcing them to choose between having a shower, collecting medication, using the shop or getting fresh air. There was a thriving substance market which was linked to the increase in violence. The physical fabric of the prison needed attention, with many cells and areas falling apart. Today, Durham Prison has young male and adult prisoners. It serves the courts of County Durham mainly. It's divided into 7 wingspan secure units. It has a segregation section and a healthcare section. Now we've gone over a brief bit of history, let's head straight into the inmates. First we start off with Lee Ford. Ford worked as a builder and a roofer and was said to have spent much of his time drinking. He was married to a lady called Leslie and had 4 stepchildren: Sarah Jane 17, Anne-Marie 16, Stephen 14 and Craig 13. Leslie and Ford also had 2 children together. They lived in Cornwall in a bungalow with their 6 children. Neighbours said they were quite reserved. Well, very reserved considering they lived in a little village where everyone knew everyone. But Ford wasn't Leslie's first husband. Leslie and her first husband lived in Hampshire with their 4 kids. In 1987 they moved back to Telford and her marriage to her first husband broke down, yet they remained very close friends and they co-parented very well. But this changed when she met Lee Ford. Ford and Leslie married in 1990. Lee Ford was a heavy drinker and was in and out of jobs. He was a drifter. Her first husband, Michael, struggled to see his children, and it all went downhill from the moment she met Ford. Ford was very jealous and controlling. He would tell Leslie what clothes she would wear and didn't like her going out without him. He then started to attack her physically. On multiple occasions, locks were changed and Leslie kicked him out, but it was only a short while after these instances that they were back together again. After 5 years, Leslie decided she had had enough and ran away to Cornwall, near to where her mum lived. Lee soon found out where Leslie and the children lived, then they eventually got back together again. The control and behaviour got worse. He then started controlling the children, making sure to pick them up from school and controlling their life too. They soon moved to another village so he could keep Leslie away from her mum. In August 2007, Leslie and her 4 children disappeared. They were reported missing, and first the police questioned Lee Ford. He had told police Leslie took the 4 children and left him, leaving the 2 they had together with him. She had been missing for around a month, with Sarah Jane, 17, Anne-Marie, 16, Stephen, 14, and Craig, 13. Lee Ford took all of his stepdaughter Sarah Jane's wages from McDonald's, and all the clothing items belonging to the 5 who were missing he put at Leslie's mum's house. He rang the schools and told them Leslie had gone off with the children and they wouldn't be back. Her family soon reported this all to the police. The police thought the issue was that she had left the 2 youngest children behind. That didn't make any sense. Within a day, suspicion was on Lee Ford. The police held a press conference to say if they were out there to come home, but the police believed at this point something more sinister had happened and wanted Lee Ford to be aware that they were investigating the case. Lee Ford then went missing and they hunted him down 2 days later. As there was no crime scene and they still had not found Leslie and the 4 children, the police arrested him for benefit fraud. They now think that Lee Ford took his 2 children into Telford to his parents' house because he knew that the police were closing in on him. After Lee Ford was arrested, they then searched the house. In the police interview, he then admitted that on the 30th of August 2000, after he had argued with his wife Leslie, she threatened to stop him seeing their 2 children. He grabbed a baseball bat and attacked her, taking her life. He then took the lives of his 4 stepchildren. He hid them in his garden and in a field 6 miles from the house. Throughout the whole process, Lee Ford showed little to no emotion and no guilt. The police then came across documents that Lee Ford essayed Sarah Jane, his stepdaughter, and this is assumed why Leslie was finally trying to leave him. But this has never been proven. He entered a plea of not guilty to murder in court. His trial was in 2001, and on the morning he then changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to 5 life terms and was given a minimum of 27 years. He is in Durham Prison now and will be able to apply for parole in 2027. Now we move on to Sara Thornton. She was married to Malcolm Thornton and she had a daughter, Louisa, from a previous marriage. Louisa was 10 years old at the time of the crime. Sara and Malcolm were together for 18 months. Malcolm was an alcoholic and was violent towards Sara and her daughter Louisa. Sara would suffer constant threats and violence throughout their relationship. Sara called the police on 5 separate occasions and asked for help from her doctor, from her local church, from the social services, from Alcoholics Anonymous and from the Marriage Guidance Council. A representative from AA saw Malcolm punch his wife on one occasion, and a neighbour spoke of how Sara had been beaten black and blue to the point where she became unconscious and required hospital treatment. Malcolm was actually due to appear in court on the charge of assault against her, but he never made the hearing. Because on the 14th of June 1989, Malcolm was drunk, and on Sara's return home he called her and told her to get out and take her daughter, otherwise Louisa would be dead meat. He threatened to kill Sara while she slept and started to taunt her with a knife. The threats of violence made Sara fear for her own life and for her daughter's life. She went to look for Thornton's old police truncheon but didn't find it, so she took a bladed item from the kitchen. Sara pleaded with her husband to go to bed, but when the threats continued, she hit him once and then called an ambulance. Malcolm passed away. Sara pleaded guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility at the trial. The prosecution labelled her as a pathological liar who had carried out the killing for financial gain, and her defence really didn't get into the torment she had suffered from her husband, and self-defence even as a concept. The defence really did fail her in her first trial of putting out the correct timeline and all the facts, as well as the situation and the toxicity in their marriage. A jury convicted her of murder, sentencing her to life imprisonment. The judge told Sara that she could have walked out of the house or gone upstairs. Sara appealed the conviction, but it was rejected in 1991. Justice for Women staged a demonstration outside the Court of Appeal in July 1991 to support Sara's appeal against her murder conviction. Her lawyers argued that the conviction should be reduced to manslaughter on the grounds of provocation. Her appeal was refused again. It took just 60 seconds for her to take the knife. This did not constitute a sudden and temporary loss of self-control. The murder was therefore considered to be premeditated, and she never got her appeal granted. After this, Sara went on a hunger strike while inside Durham Prison. She appealed again in September 1992 with the submission of new evidence showing the extent of the domestic violence Sara had suffered and its impact on her mental state. Initially, the Home Secretary refused to grant a further appeal, but in May 1995 this was granted by Michael Howard. On the 28th of July 1995, she was freed on bail pending appeal. She was then eventually granted leave to appeal. At the hearing in December 1995, lawyers argued she was a victim of battered woman syndrome as a result of her husband's repeated violence, something which had resulted in her losing control and killing him. Her murder conviction was quashed and a retrial ordered the following year. She faced her second trial in May 1996, and a 12-day hearing took place at Oxford Crown Court. The prosecution presented evidence that she had talked of killing her husband to a colleague. Psychiatrists successfully argued that she suffered from dissociation, which is where a person can feel disconnected from their surroundings and from their emotional and physical experiences. She was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. She was released from custody as a result of time already served. Afterwards, she said that she believed her sentence was fair, quoting, "I am not saying that every woman should be sent to prison, but for me it was fair. I took a life at the end of the day." The next inmate is Colin Ash-Smith. He was born in 1968 and he was 24 years old at the time of his crime. He worked locally as a milkman and still lived with his parents. His mother Diane was a former Labour Party councillor and later mayor. He had a long crime record. In December 1988, he had tried to and take the life of a young mother in a quarry. In October 1995, he had attacked 22-year-old Charlotte Bernard close to where he had committed a crime 3 years earlier, and that crime was taking the life of Claire Tiltman. Claire was a Year 11 pupil at Dartford Grammar School for Girls. She took a shortcut down an alleyway on her way to meet a friend near her home. It was only around 100 steps away from a busy main road. In this alleyway, she was attacked and had her life taken. It wasn't until 2014 that Colin Ash-Smith was charged with her murder. He confessed to another prisoner in Wakefield Prison that he had taken the life of Claire. This prisoner then informed the police. This confession was huge in bringing him to justice for the murder of Claire. He had first been questioned in 1995, in the same year that he committed the second of the 2 attacks of women. He was charged with Claire's murder on the day he was due to be considered for release by the parole board. He had already served 18 years of a life sentence. He was told he would spend a minimum of another 21 years behind bars. One of the sickest parts of this case is he denied attacking Claire, and he attended Claire's funeral a month after. He attended this funeral with his parents, wearing the same beige jacket he had worn on the night of the crime. His mother Diane, who I mentioned was a Labour Party councillor, told police that he had been driving her home at the time of the attack on Claire. In 1997, she said neither she, her husband or son had anything to do with Claire's killing. His father Aubrey, who passed away in May 2016, had also served as a Labour Party councillor. He was jailed for 12 months in 1997 for perverting the course of justice. He had destroyed a knife just before the family home was due to be searched by police. He then admitted he boiled, dismantled and threw away the knife to destroy evidence. Ford remains in Durham Prison. The next inmate we look at is Marie-Thérèse Kouao. Victoria Climbier's parents had 6 other children. They lived in poverty in the capital of the Ivory Coast, and they wanted Victoria to have a better life. The parents say that Kouao, the great auntie, duped them into believing she would take good care of their daughter. She was Victoria's great aunt. She took her first to France, claiming she could arrange great education. Her parents accepted, despite only meeting the great auntie a handful of times. Kouao's real intentions were to use Victoria for better state benefits and to get on the housing lists. Victoria wasn't the first child she had tried to do this with either. She had initially tried to take a girl called Anna and had created a fake passport with this name. In 1998, they arrived in Paris. She made Victoria wear hair extensions to look more like the fake passport photo, and because of this, Victoria was known as Anna during her time in France and the UK. It didn't take long for Victoria to start suffering at the hands of her great auntie. While in Paris, she was given warnings after enrolling Victoria in school, as she was often absent. A social worker got involved in February 1999, and they were evicted from their house in France. At this point, in April 1999, she brought Victoria to London. In London, Victoria lived in a flat with her great auntie and her boyfriend Carl Manning. It was a tiny studio flat in North London. From the moment Victoria arrived in the UK, the 7-year-old was excited for her new adventure, hoping that she would get a better education. But this was all a lie. She suffered horrific abuse by these vile human beings. The first signs to public services were in July 1999. Victoria was cut and bruised and was seen by a consultant and a child protection doctor. She was taken to hospital by her childminder Avril. Avril told the hospital she was very concerned, and despite this, she was placed back with her auntie after a doctor was persuaded that the injuries were self-inflicted as Victoria had scabies. A social worker and a child protection officer were supposed to go to the home to meet with Victoria, but they cancelled this home visit when they heard Victoria had scabies. Victoria was admitted to hospital again. This is when a meeting happened. Victoria's auntie told the police officer and the social worker that she had poured hot water over her niece's head because she was itchy, and that the other injuries came from her injuring herself with a fork and a spoon. She was handed back to her auntie. No health visitors checked on Victoria after her discharge. In the October, Manning, her auntie's boyfriend, began to force Victoria to sleep in a bin bag in the bath due to her incontinence. She had no heating or light and could only eat by putting her face directly into a food plate as she was tied up. Victoria's social worker attempted to make contact many times, but contact couldn't be established. From October 1999 to February 2000, she was being horrifically abused. On the 1st of November 1999, Victoria made an allegation against Manning. This was withdrawn the next day. The police officer believed Victoria's great auntie put the child up to it in order to get housing. PC Jones was assigned to find out why the false allegation was made, although her letter to the family home was ignored and no further action was taken. Kouao visited social workers numerous times and brought along Victoria for at least half of these visits as she tried to get housing. Despite social workers noticing that Victoria did not look healthy, no action was taken. A distant relative of the auntie visited them in June, the family member calling Brent Social Services as Victoria had a new facial scar and had lost a lot of weight. This family member continued to try and follow up on this, calling the social services again. However, despite a referral being created, very little, if anything, was done. In February, Kouao took Victoria to her church. Members of the church insisted that the child be taken to hospital. She was suffering from organ failure, as well as many other things. She had around 128 scars and injuries. She passed away in hospital on the 25th of February 2000. In November 2000, the trial began of Kouao and her boyfriend Manning for Victoria's murder. This was at the Old Bailey in London. The court heard how the girl was tied up and abused for 24 hours or more. The Child Protection Team's investigation of Victoria's case, which allowed her to be returned to the auntie and to Manning, was criticised as being incompetent. The National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children called for a complete overhaul of child protection procedures. Kouao and Mannings were found guilty and were jailed for life. Victoria's passing influenced changes in the law. An amendment was known as the Child Act 2004. It intended to create better coordination between child welfare services. With her passing, it also introduced the Every Child Matters framework, an initiative that strives to support children in the UK no matter their background. Manning, who is now 52, was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2001 and ordered to serve a minimum of 21 years behind bars. He made appeal for freedom and has been granted a third parole hearing that will happen in 2025. Her auntie Kouao was in Durham Prison, but was then moved to Low Newton Prison, which is where she remains. The next inmate we look at is David Boyd. Boyd admitted that he had fantasies after he took the life of 7-year-old Nikki Allen on the 7th of October 1992 in Sunderland. On this day, Nikki was walking home from her grandfather's flat on the same estate that she lived when she disappeared. She set off at 8:30 p.m. When her mum Sharon arrived home, she was nowhere to be seen. More than 100 neighbours helped search for Nikki. The following day, her shoes and coat were spotted outside a nearby quayside old exchange building. Her body was then found inside the basement of this building. David Boyd was not the first suspect, but actually a local boy called George Heron. He stood trial for Nikki's murder in 1993. A knife matching the injuries was found in Heron's home. There was also splatters that were found on Heron's shoes and clothing. Heron's sister told police that after he had returned home on the night of the crime, he had gone straight to the bathroom for a good half an hour, something which Heron would not usually do. He had gone to the bathroom to wash both himself and his clothes. Heron had denied being out on the evening of the murder, although 4 witnesses said that they had seen a man at the Head pub and the Clarendon pub who matched his description. He was seen buying cheese and onion crisps, which were Nikki's favourite crisps, and police believe that he had used these to lure Nikki into the building. After 3 days of questioning, Heron confessed to the murder, although he had previously denied the murder 120 times. The evidence against Heron was all circumstantial. However, police believed that a conviction would be secured. The case against him collapsed after the judge ruled that Heron's taped confession to the crime was inadmissible in court. The judge blamed heavy-handed police tactics for this outcome. Heron was found not guilty of Nikki's murder and was given a change of identity and was moved out of Sunderland. In 1994, Sharon, Nikki's mother, brought a civil case against Heron. She said that he should have been charged with battery on a child resulting in death. A court found this to be in her favour and ordered him to pay her more than £7,000. He was unable to be traced, which meant that the money was never paid. In May 2023, the police apologised to him. In February 2014, imprisoned serial killer Stephen Greaveson was arrested on suspicion of Nikki's murder. He was questioned and was later told that he would face no further action. In May 2016, a woman contacted Sharon, Nikki's mother, claiming to have new information about the crime. The woman was 12 years old at the time of the crime and had been babysitting nearby when Nikki disappeared. She spoke to police. In September that same year, Sharon called for a full re-investigation of the crime, and she launched an online petition urging the police to carry out a top-to-bottom review of the case. This petition attracted more than 500 signatures in less than 24 hours. The following month, Sharon contacted Stephen Greaveson, asking him to share anything that he may know about Nikki's death. In October 2017, police said that they had successfully recovered a DNA sample from an unknown male. On the 17th of April, the police raided a home. To the press, the man wasn't named. David Boyd was then arrested on suspicion of Nikki's murder. He already had a long criminal record. He had been convicted in March 2000 of indecent assault of a young girl. Boyd had also been convicted of breaching the peace in 1986 when he approached 4 children and grabbed a 10-year-old girl. He then admitted after these that he had an attraction towards young girls. He appeared in court on the 24th of May 2022 and was remanded in custody. On the 20th of June 2022, he appeared in Newcastle Crown Court via video link and pleaded not guilty to Nikki's murder. On the 20th of April 2023, the trial of Boyd began at Newcastle Crown Court. The prosecution alleged that he had lured Nikki to some wasteland next to the River Ware, where she was struck. During the trial, it was reported that at the time of the crime, David Boyd was known as David Smith or David Bell, and he was aged 25. He also had a girlfriend called Caroline Branton, who had occasionally babysat Nikki. The case was described as circumstantial but compelling due to the fact that Boyd's DNA had been found on Nikki's clothing. Boyd suggested to police that the DNA may have been there because she had wiped her hands in his saliva and had smeared it onto her clothes after he had spat off his balcony that night, and that it may have hit Nikki. The defence of him said various strands of evidence don't prove and that they were the result of innocent coincidences. The defence also highlighted the fact that the crime showed no evidence of a motive, making Boyd's prior convictions and his interest in young girls irrelevant to the case. On the 23rd of May 2023, Boyd was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 29 years. He will be able to apply for parole on the 16th of August 2049. He remains in Durham Prison. Now we look at Maxine Robinson, who was born in 1968. In 1989, Robinson's 9-month-old daughter Victoria passed away suddenly at their family home in Durham. The death was not considered suspicious at the time and was judged to be a cot death. In 1993, both Robinson's 19-month-old daughter Christine and 5-month-old son Anthony also passed away suddenly. Suspicion soon fell on Maxine, the mother. After Victoria, her first child, passed away, she received resuscitation training. When her 2 children then passed away suddenly, she did not use this training to help them. Robinson denied that she took their lives and claimed the children also suffered from cot death. Some experts called by the defence at her trial agreed with her claims that the deaths were natural. A Home Office pathologist testified that the deaths were consistent with having their lives taken. Robinson was convicted of their murders at a trial in 1995. She appealed against the verdict, but her conviction was upheld. Robinson's conviction had in part been based upon the evidence of paediatrician Roy Meadow, who had devised a statistical theory that said that more than one unexplained child death in a family was suspicious and more than 2 indicated murder. Meadows' work was discredited and several convictions based upon his evidence were quashed. Before a review could occur, Robinson told a prison listener at Durham Prison that she had taken the lives of all 3 of her children, revealing that she had done it while they were sleeping. She was then charged with Victoria's murder in April 2004. She was advised by her defence to plead guilty with diminished responsibility, but she instead pleaded guilty to murder, saying she had taken her children's lives. She said she took Victoria's life as she had been unable to cope with her and was depressed at the time and was criticised by her mother. Robinson was already serving a life sentence for the murder of her 2 younger children when she pleaded guilty to murdering Victoria. She remains in prison. We now look at inmate Kieran Patrick Kelly, who was born in 1930 in the small town in Ireland. He and his family moved back to Dublin in the 1940s. Once the family moved to Dublin, he became involved in petty crime. At 18, he joined the British Army, but was discharged in 1951 for going AWOL. He moved back and forth between Dublin and London for a number of years, being a little bit of a drifter, but then he settled in London in 1960. He got married and had a number of children. He worked in the construction industry. Then his marriage broke down, and then he became an alcoholic. This led to him becoming homeless. He also had mental health issues and had spent time in Broadmoor Hospital. He was arrested for petty theft in 1983 while in a police holding cell. He attacked another homeless man, William Boyd. He took his life. He was charged with this murder and interviewed, and then he spoke to London police claiming that he had taken the lives or attempted to take the lives of around a dozen people in London using a variety of methods, from pushing people in front of trains to setting them on fire or poisoning them. If his confessions are true, he would be one of the most infamous serial killers active in the UK and one of the only claimed or known Irish serial killers. In June 1984, he was convicted of the 1983 manslaughter of William Boyd and the murder of another homeless man in 1975, Hector Fisher. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He passed away in 2001 in Durham Prison. He claimed that he took the lives of 31 people, but it is assumed he took the lives of around 6 to 7, but this has never been proven. Now we look at inmate Maria Rossi. Tina Malloy and Maria Rossi were best friends, and they took the life of 70-year-old Edna Phillips in July 1992 in an estate in Wales. Malloy and Rossi were 17 at the time of the crime. They attacked the half-blind pensioner with a dog chain and then threw broken eggs over her while they were high on drink and substances. On the 16th of July 1992, Edna was walking her dog when she exchanged words with Maria Rossi about her younger sister. She returned to her house at around 10:45 p.m, but came out again to call in the dog. It was at this point she was set upon by Rossi and Malloy. Rossi had known Edna since she was a baby, and a day after she had taken her life, she boasted about the attack and was singing "We Have Killed Edna" to the tune of The Wizard of Oz. Edna Phillips had endured months of torment in what was otherwise an isolated life on the council estate. The 70-year-old had made complaints about loud music and drunkenness coming from the house next door, and reported a teenage girl that lived there to the police. They then began a campaign of hate against Edna, dumping rubbish in her garden, throwing stones at her, and even smearing feces on her wall. The abuse had got so bad that Edna, who lived alone with her dog Chum, had asked her local council to rehouse her. She even wrote to her MP after Maria burgled her house. It was revealed that Edna even used to take Rossi on walks when she was a toddler. But over the years, the relationship soured after Edna made complaints about drunken parties and loud music constantly coming from the house. Edna reported that Rossi had burgled her house on one occasion in 1992. When the girls were eventually charged with this crime, a 300-strong crowd of local people stormed the homes of both families. Both families were driven out of the area and placed at new secret addresses for their own protection. 17-year-old Rossi and Malloy appeared for sentencing at Cardiff Crown Court on the 8th of March 1993 after pleading guilty to murder. Judge Baker sentenced both to life imprisonment with a minimum term of only 15 years. In May 2017, it emerged that Malloy, who is believed to have changed her name following her release from prison, had been found dead at a property in Cambridgeshire. The death was not treated as suspicious. Rossi is now free. Now we look at Raoul Moat, who was born on the 17th of June 1973. He was a bouncer and a tree surgeon from Newcastle. His mum had bipolar disorder, and he had quite a hard upbringing. He and his half-brother Angus were brought up by their grandmother, as his mum spent lots of time in and out of mental health hospitals. Before he committed his awful crime, he had attempted to get himself psychiatric help. Between February and July in 2010, he served an 18-week sentence in Durham Prison for assaulting a 9-year-old relative. He had been arrested 12 times, resulting in charges for 7 separate offences. He only had one previous conviction for common assault. He had a young daughter with his ex-girlfriend Samantha Stobart. He had apparently held a grudge against police because Samantha had told him that her new boyfriend was a policeman. He actually wasn't, and the only reason Samantha told him this was because she was scared of him. When he was released from prison, he posted threats to police and others on social media. He made detailed threats in 2 other letters and several phone calls to police stating he had no intention of harming the public, but would continue to harm police officers. He was released from Durham Prison on the 1st of July, and then arrived in the early hours of the 3rd of July 2010 at Samantha and her new partner's home. He was 29 years old and a karate instructor called Chris Brown. Brown had moved to the area from Berkshire at around 6 months before. According to Moat, he crouched under the open window of the living room for an hour and a half, listening to Samantha and Brown mocking him. At 2:40 a.m, her boyfriend left the house to confront him, but he was shot at close range. He had his life taken. Moat then fired through the living room window while Samantha's mother was on the phone to the police. Samantha was hit in the arm and one other place and taken to hospital. Thankfully, she survived. At 12:45 a.m. on the 4th of July, Police Constable David Rathband was shot at while sitting in a police vehicle on the roundabout of the A1. Rathband was taken to Newcastle General Hospital in a critical condition, with injuries to his head and upper body. The Guardian had reported that Moat had called the police 12 minutes before shooting Rathband to taunt them and tell them what he was about to do. He did so again some 15 minutes after the shooting, during which he showed little remorse and complained that the police had not taken him seriously enough. Police responded by saying they were taking him seriously and that Brown had no connection to the police. They urged him to hand himself in for the sake of his 3 children. The manhunt for him actually became one of the largest in the UK. A total of 160 armed officers were deployed to find Moat, which represented around 10% of those available in England and Wales at any one time. The police confirmed that they had received a 49-page letter given by Moat to a friend on the 3rd of July, warning that they were going to pay for what they've done. The letter also stated that the public need not fear me, but the police should, as I won't stop till I am dead. In this letter, he said his children, his freedom, his house, Samantha, and their daughter had all been taken from him. He said he had issues and was running out of options. He said he was never violent towards his children. On the 9th of July, a cordon was set up around the National Trust's Cragside estate in the parish of Cartington. The police reported they recovered 3 mobile phones used by Moat in recent days. On the 9th of July in the early evening, residents around that area were told to stay indoors because a major security operation was taking place. The news reported that an individual resembling Moat had been surrounded by police. At around 1:15 a.m. on the 10th of July, news agencies reported that at least 1 shot had been fired in a standoff. A statement from the police afterwards said that no shots were fired by police officers and that the suspect had taken his own life. On the 6th of July, 2 men were arrested after police initially believed them to have been Moat's hostages, but they were then arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder and possession of a firearm with intent. On the 8th of July, the 2 men were named as bodybuilder Colin Ash-Smith, who was 26 years old, and Sean Awan, who was aged 23. They appeared in Newcastle court, charged with conspiracy to commit murder and possession of a firearm. It was alleged that the men had supplied the gun to Moat and were both with him when he shot PC Rathband on the 4th of July, and that Ness had accompanied Moat during the initial shooting of Stobart and Brown. Prosecution counsel Paul Smith therefore alleged the 2 men had actively helped Moat look for policemen to shoot on the 4th of July. Ness was given 3 concurrent sentences totaling a minimum term of 40 years for the murder of Christopher Brown, conspiracy to murder and the attempted murder of PC David Rathband. His friend Awan received 2 concurrent sentences for conspiracy to murder and the attempted murder of the police officer and would have to serve at least 20 years in prison. Just over 18 months after the shooting, although David survived, he struggled to come with terms as he lost his vision. He took his own life on the 29th of February 2012. In June, he had been due to carry the Olympic torch as part of the 2012 Summer Olympics torch relay. His daughter Mia, who replaced him, chose to run blindfolded in a tribute to her father. He had spearheaded the Blue Lamp Foundation, which was started by him and his identical twin Darren whilst he was recovering from his injuries. This charity today still assists emergency staff injured in the line of duty. The next 2 cases we have covered very frequently, so it will just be a very brief overlook and then we will move on to cases that I haven't covered before. The first is Mary Ann Cotton, who was born on the 31st of October 1832. She was convicted of murdering her stepson by poisoning him. It's believed that she may have been a serial killer who killed many others, including 11 of her 13 children and 3 of her 4 husbands for their life insurance policies. She would use arsenic. She got caught after she tried to have the son of her deceased husband sent to a workhouse. When that failed within days, she told parish officials that Charles Edward Cotton had died. Investigations into her behaviour soon showed a pattern. The body of her stepson was examined and found to contain arsenic. She was convicted of the murder and sentenced to death. She was sent to the gallows at Durham Prison. She didn't actually pass away on the gallows, but passed away because the rope was set too short. People believe this was possibly deliberately. The next is Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. They took the lives of children in and around Manchester between July 1963 and October 1965. The 5 children were Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans. 4 of them were essayed. 2 of the children were discovered in 1965 in Saddleworth Moor. The 3rd was discovered there in 1987. Bennett's body has never been found, despite it being buried there. They were charged with 3 of the murders: John Kilbride, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans. They received whole life tariffs. The investigation was then reopened in 1985 after Brady confessed to the murders of Reed and Bennett. Hindley had said she was innocent the whole time, but this stopped in 1987 and she confessed to all of the murders. Brady and Hindley were taken separately to Saddleworth Moor to assist in the search of the children. Hindley made several appeals against a life sentence, claiming she was a reformed woman and no longer a danger to society, but she was never released. She passed away in 2002 at the age of 60 after serving 36 years in prison. Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined in a high-security Ashworth hospital. He made it clear that he wished to never be released and repeatedly asked to be allowed to die. They both served time in Durham Prison while they were awaiting their trial. Brady died in 2017 at the age of 79. He served 51 years in prison. Now we look at inmate Bernadette McNeilly, who took the life of Suzanne Jane Capar with a group of other people. Suzanne was described as a gentle and easily influenced girl. She had been babysat by Jean Powell since she was 6 years old. Her parents separated in 1990 and she began to spend lots of time at Jean Powell's house. Powell lived at 97 Langworthy Road in Moston. Powell also dealt substances and was involved with the handling of stolen cars. Powell then became very good friends with Bernadette McNeilly, who was described as evil. Bernadette had recently moved in 3 doors away at number 91. She had 3 children. She then moved in with Powell and her 3 children, where the two shared a bed in the downstairs dining room because the bedrooms were full of children. Capar continued to stay at the home, even though she was bullied and taunted by him. Her sister said it was not that she was scared of them, it's just that she would do anything for them. She pampered their every whim. In November 1992, Dodson, who was a friend, had contracted pubic lice and had his pubic hair shaved. McNeilly told him she thought that he had caught them from Capar. Dodson believed otherwise and said later, "I told Jean Powell I thought I got them from Bernie McNeilly." On the 7th of December, Capar was lured to Powell's home with Glynn and Dodson, who were already waiting. She was grabbed as soon as she arrived and held down while they shaved her head and eyebrows. They then made her clean up the hair and place it in a bin. They then placed a plastic bag over her head and walked her around while hitting her. Capar was then kicked by Powell and Bernadette McNeilly as she lay curled up on the floor, with both women taking turns at attacking her. She was then taken to a bathroom and forced to shave off her own hair as a humiliation in revenge for having caused, as they claimed, them getting lice. Afterwards, she was locked in a cupboard overnight. The following morning, Capar was taken upstairs and locked into another cupboard. On the 8th of December, she was transferred to Bernadette McNeilly's house because of concern that Powell and the 6 children would be disturbed by Capar's crying. They then attacked her over the next 5 days. She was subjected to a series of violent acts. In the early hours of the 14th of December 1992, Capar was forced into the boot of a stolen white Fiat Panda car and driven 15 miles to a narrow lane near the outskirts of Stockport. In the car were Bernadette McNeilly, the Powells and Dodson. McNeilly giggled as they made the journey. Powell later said that Capar was pushed down an embankment in a patch of brambles, where Bernadette McNeilly poured petrol over her. They then lit a match, where Bernadette McNeilly began to sing "Burn Baby, Burn." They then left her there. Capar managed to get up the embankment and stagger along the lane for around a quarter of a mile. She was found at 6:10 by Barry Sutcliffe and 2 of his colleagues on their way to work. They immediately took her to a nearby house, and an ambulance soon arrived and took her to hospital. Before Suzanne fell into a coma, she was able to tell the police the 6 people who had assaulted her. She passed away in December 1992. All 6 were charged. Bernadette McNeilly was given life imprisonment and found guilty of conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm, false imprisonment, and murder. Her minimum tariff is 25 years. Jean Powell was found guilty of murder, guilty of conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm, and false imprisonment. She was given life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 25 years. Glyn Powell was found guilty of murder, guilty of conspiracy, and guilty of false imprisonment. He was given the same, life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 25 years. Jeffrey Lee pleaded guilty to false imprisonment and was acquitted of murder and acquitted of conspiracy and was handed 12 years. Anthony Dodson was found guilty of murder and would be detained indefinitely with a minimum tariff of 18 years. This was reduced by 2 years in 2002. Clifford Pook pleaded guilty to conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm and false imprisonment and received 15 years. Jeffrey Lee appealed against his sentence, which was reduced from 12 years to 9 on the 4th of November 1994. In 2002, Dodson's minimum tariff was cut from 18 years to 16. Dodson appealed again, arguing that the reduction was insufficient and that the Lord Chief Justice had failed to reflect on the continuing obligation to have a regard to Dodson's welfare. Dodson was moved to an open prison in 2009 and is currently free. Jean Powell and Bernadette McNeilly were granted leave to have the lengths of their minimum sentences reviewed at the Court of Appeal in June 2012. McNeilly's sentence was reduced by 1 year. She was incarcerated at Durham Prison. There was a routine security check in 1996 which uncovered letters which revealed she had been having an affair with the prison governor, Mike Martin. The married governor resigned his position before he could be fired. McNeilly, who was sharing a wing with Rosemary West and Myra Hindley, was immediately transferred to Newhall Prison. Lee was freed early from his sentence in 1998, Pook in May 2001. They were both released on licence. Dodson was released in 2013. McNeilly was paroled in 2015 after having her 25-year minimum cut by 1 year. She was described as a model prisoner. Jean Powell was released in 2017 and Glyn Powell was released on licence in May 2023. Ronald Kray is the next person we look at. He spent some time in Durham Prison. He and his twin brother Reggie Kray were born on the 24th of October 1933. They were English gangsters and had a huge organised crime business. They were very prominent from the late 1950s and peaked in the 1960s. Their gang was known as The Firm and was based in Bethnal Green in London. They were involved in murder, armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, gambling and assaults. The Krays were arrested on the 8th of May 1968 and convicted in 1969. They were both given life imprisonment. Ronnie was certified insane and was committed to Broadmoor Hospital in 1979. He remained there until he passed away on the 17th of March 1995. Reggie was released from prison in August 2000 and passed away 5 weeks later. And now we look at Judith Ward. The M62 coach bombing happened on the 4th of February 1974. An IRA bomb was hidden inside the luggage locker of a coach carrying off-duty British Armed Forces and their family. The bomb took the lives of 12 people and injured 38 others. 10 days after this happened, 25-year-old Judith Ward was arrested in Liverpool while she was waiting to travel to Ireland on the 14th of February. She was described as a mentally ill English woman. She was standing in a shop doorway in Liverpool city centre seeking shelter from the rain. Her driving licence had been issued in Northern Ireland. She was then detained for questioning. Police discovered the address on her driving licence was false. She was then asked how she intended to travel with very little money on her. In response, she claimed to have intended to telephone a friend who would send her money. With Ward's consent, swabs were taken from her fingernails and hands. A forensic scientist then did a grease test. They then searched a caravan where she once lived. After these tests were done, the forensic scientist revealed there was faint traces of nitrites on her nail. Ward was known to have a personality disorder and was interviewed by the police. She then claimed to have been a member of the IRA since 1971, but after the bombing she just wanted out. She was charged with the crime and convicted. She remained incarcerated in Durham Prison until her conviction was quashed by the Court of Appeal in 1992. With the court hearing, government forensic scientists had deliberately withheld information from her defence counsel at her October 1974 trial, which strongly indicated her innocence. Her conviction was declared unsafe. She was released from prison in May 1992, having served over 17 years of a life sentence. Her wrongful conviction is seen as one of the worst miscarriages of justice in British legal history. No one else was charged. Our last inmate is John Straffen, who was born on the 27th of February 1930 at Borden Camp in Hampshire. From a young age, he began committing acts of petty theft. He also bunked from school. He was referred to a child guidance clinic for his behaviour in 1938, but just a few months later he appeared in court for stealing a purse from a young girl. He was sentenced to 2 years probation. His probation officer discovered that he did not understand the difference between right or wrong or the meaning of probation, and he was diagnosed as mentally defective. In 1940 he was sent to St Joseph's School, which was a school for mentally defective children. He would have to remain there until the age of 16. He then underwent an intellectual assessment which revealed his IQ to be 58 and his mental age to be 6 years. At 16 he left here and went home to be with his family, who then lived in Bath. That same year, on the 27th of July 1947, a 13-year-old girl reported to police that a blonde-haired teenager named John had essayed her after putting his hand over her mouth and saying, "What would you do if I took your life? I've done it before." The police were unable to locate the person and would only link Straffen to this offence much later. 6 weeks after committing the essay, he is known to have taken the lives of 5 chickens belonging to the father of a teenage girl who he had recently argued with. He was charged with theft again and was sent to prison. He served 20 months. He left prison after those 20 months but then committed theft again and was sent straight back to prison. He was considered sufficiently rehabilitated because he had good behaviour, so he was allowed short periods of unsupervised home leave. He used this time to obtain a job at a market garden as an odd job man using the skills that he had gained while in Winchester prison. He was allowed to keep his job. Shortly after, staff authorised Straffen to be returned to the care of his family, who lived in Bath. He was released finally, but his crimes got worse. On the 15th of July 1951, Straffen visited the local cinema, which he did most Sundays. His route took him past 1 Camden Crescent in Bath, where 5-year-old Brenda Constance Goddard lived with her foster parents. She was not allowed to venture out of her garden, but was playing out the front. She crossed the road to a meadow close to her home to gather buttercups and daisies. He observed Brenda as she gathered flowers in this meadow, and the child looked up and smiled at him. He then asked, "What are you doing?" Brenda replied, "Picking flowers," before extending her arm to display the bunch of flowers. After learning Brenda's name, he stated, "I know a place where there are even more flowers. They're in that wood. Shall I show you?" Brenda agreed. At the entrance, he took her life. Brenda's foster mother reported her missing at 3:15 p.m. She was discovered at 7:10 p.m. The location was just 300 yards from her home. Straffen was questioned by Bath City Police in relation to Brenda's murder on the 3rd of August. He admitted to having worn a navy blue suit on the date of the child's death, and that he may have been the individual in such attire seen by Brenda's foster mother walking past her home shortly before she had noticed Brenda was missing, but he denied any involvement in the crime. As police had no physical evidence linking Straffen to the crime, they were unable to charge him with the murder. On the 8th of August, Straffen met 9-year-old Cicely Batstone at the Forum Cinema in Bath as they watched Tarzan and the Jungle Queen. He offered the child a sweet, and the two had a good conversation, with Cicely informing him her mother had allowed her to travel to the cinema alone, as it was Children's Day, although she was unsure of the exact meaning of this term. He replied that the term likely meant children could do as they pleased for the entire day. When the film finished, he offered to take Cicely to another local cinema to watch The West, and she wore a yellow ribbon, with the promise of paying for her ticket. The little girl agreed, and the two travelled via a bus across the town. Shortly after leaving the bus, the two were observed walking along Bloomfield Road in the direction of a meadow at around 8 p.m. by a woman named Violet Cowley. Cowley was the wife of a policeman. They entered the meadow, and then he took her life. She was reported missing at 11 p.m. and a large-scale manhunt was implemented to locate her. Prior to learning of Cicely's disappearance, Violet Cowley was mindful of the unsolved murder of Brenda Goddard, had mentioned to her policeman husband having observed a young dark-haired girl dressed in a grey cardigan and a coloured dress walking in the direction of the Tumps, which was the meadow, in the company of a blonde-haired, slender young man, and how the sighting had made her very uneasy. The police were informed, and then they looked in the meadow, where they found her with her life taken. Other eyewitnesses had also observed Straffen with her prior to her having her life taken. Police drove to Straffen's home to question him in relation to the murder on the morning of the 9th of August. When informed of the purpose of their visit, Straffen replied, "Is it about the girl I was at the pictures with last night?" He was then driven to the old police station to face questioning. He admitted to investigators he had been with her on the afternoon of the murder. However, he denied that he took her life. After some time of questioning, he then admitted to taking her life. He also confessed to the murder of Brenda Goddard, stating, "The other girl, I did her the same." When he was asked why he had done these crimes, he stated he gave the police something to really do, because he would usually just do petty theft. He was charged with the murder the following day. He stood trial on the 17th of October 1951 and was ordered to be detained at Broadmoor Hospital. On the 29th of April 1952, he escaped from Broadmoor Hospital, climbing over the 10-foot wall. He walked for around 7 miles and then arrived in a village called Farley Hill. At around 5:30, a resident saw him sitting on a bench watching 5-year-old Linda Boyer, who was randomly riding a new bicycle around the village. The final eyewitness sighting of the child alive occurred at around 5:50 p.m. Linda was led to a nearby field and then had her life taken by him. He then made his way to a local pub and was seen talking to several children in a field behind the pub. He was arrested in the field at 6:40 p.m. Linda was then reported missing by her mother. It was soon found that Straffen had taken her life. He was arrested and charged with Linda's murder. He was then sent to the hospital wing of Brixton Prison. He was found guilty of the murder and was sentenced to death. His date was fixed for the 4th of September, but this sentence was commuted to one of life imprisonment. He was moved from Broadmoor to Wandsworth Prison 4 years later in 1956. He was then transferred to Cardiff Prison and then transferred again to Durham Prison. He passed away in Franklin Prison after he had a brief illness on the 19th of November 2007. He was 77 years old and had been incarcerated for 55 years and 3 months. And that concludes our video today. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.